So on one hand, I was a bit like, right, let me try and make sure I dress like everybody else. Let me try and make sure I talk like everybody else.
Even if we do nothing now about race, that it's so ingrained and so systematically adopted that without anyone challenging or trying to deconstruct it, it would just continuously stay there forever.
My silence had contributed to this idea that racism wasn't an issue.
But is this a construct that's happened from the beginning of when the UK took power, or is this something that there's been elements of and it's just been improved on and so made even more powerful by, you know, the minds that be that started this?
There is so much wasted energy that Black people, the other minoritized individuals are facing by dealing with racism, that stops us being able to solve some of the other world's biggest problems.
Hello guys, and welcome back to the Journey podcast. Today we have a very special guest, my first female podcaster. I'm really excited. Her name is Shereen Daniels, also known as the HR conversationalist. She's an advocate for anti-racism in business, also the vice chair of Black Business Association. And I am really, really, really excited to have her as my first female guest. And I think it's going to be a great show. We're going to be educated and getting inspiration for all those young folk. And as I said before on this podcast, we're hoping this transcends through cultures, barriers, you know, every single sort of type of society that's thrown out there. Sorry, a bit nervous there. Shereen, how are you today?
I'm all the better for being here with you, Russell. What can I say? When you did the intro, I wanted to go.
Yeah, you should have. Why didn't you? That's why I was getting nervous. I was like, come on, where's the energy? Where's the energy over here? I wish you had.
I didn't want to interrupt your flow.
Come on, brap, that we need all of that. We need all of that. So, Shereen, obviously, it's a pleasure to have you. I'm really excited to get into this conversation with you. I already can tell you're one of those hard hitting, going to be keeping it straight to the truth, which is what we want out here.
Keeping it all the way 100.
Yeah, that's how we like it. Obviously, for me, this podcast is, I think it's going to bring value. Initially, it was for young people, you know, from sort of from the background I came from, that I felt, you know, lower income families, and trying to show that it doesn't matter what your background is or what the start in life you get or what country you come from, that, you know, each person's journey is unique and it has a lot of highs and lows. Sometimes there can be more lows than highs, but, you know, as long as you stick at it and you can achieve whatever you put your mind to. And, you know, each guest that I bring on, I'm hopefully going to unpack what they feel comfortable in their own life. And, you know, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of gold in yours and taking us on this journey on how you're, you know, challenging something, especially in the UK, that is, you know, is becoming more forefront to society, but I think, you know, still has a very, very long way to go. Right. And, you know, having my own experiences in battling and fighting through, you know, adversity and racism and other things, you know, it'll be really good to get a guide from yourself or business owners, young people, etc. So, yeah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself right now? What is Shereen Daniels up to?
Oh my goodness. Like, do you know what I call myself? Like, disturbing the peace. Right. So if anybody was to Google me, you pretty much find that I spend my time dropping non-impact grenades.
Yes, that's what we like to hear. Dropping.
You know, yeah, I don't want anyone to think like I'm just like chopping off limbs and stuff. But I normally hang out on LinkedIn, and my job, this self-appointed job that I gave myself, is to you know, ensure that we respect the seriousness of the issue that is racism.
Love that.
So we can actually do a much better job of dismantling it, because I am sick and tired of every generation us having the same conversation over and over and over again. And I just feel like, in my mind, like, I know everyone always says this, I bet they probably said this in the civil rights movement in the 1960s, right? But in my mind, I feel like we have to be the generation that
stomps
actually
this out.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Come on.
Kicking down doors and all of that business, like not accepting what we've been told. So that's kind of what I'm up to most days.
Okay.
And, and mother of 2 children. I've got 2 daughters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, an almost 13-year-old who keeps reminding me that she's almost 13. Like everything is almost 13, mom. And I've got a 2-year-old as well.
Okay. Amazing.
So I do that. And and obviously like a side point, but I also do run my own company. I know most people think I don't. They just think I'm out here like recording videos and just disturbing the peace.
Disrupting the peace.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's me.
Okay, that's amazing. So, I mean, that sounds like a full-time job in itself, obviously, just disturbing the peace, as it were. And then you're running a company and raising 2 young children. So, that's amazing by any feat. My sister, she's a young mum herself. So I can't imagine what it must be like with 2.
Yeah.
Challenging, especially now. She's 30. Your oldest daughter's 13, so you're about to start getting challenged right now. She's about to start. She's about to start coming for the power. Yeah.
What do you mean? This has been going on since she was like 10.
Okay. And well, she's learning from the best. Someone who's challenging and knocking down and knocking on doors of anti-racism. So I mean, she's got some big boots to fill, and she's already beginning.
Yeah, she is. She is.
So, Shereen, one of the things that we do on the podcast is kind of wherever you feel comfortable. I'm going to kind of take your lead and just kind of keep you on path and sort of roll with your journey. Where do you want to start? We could either work backwards from where we are now, or we can go straight to the beginning. Like, where was Shereen Daniels born? You don't have to go into every single detail, but I feel it like,
shall I tell the story?
Yes, come on, let's do it.
Yes. All right, then I'll tell the story. I think I can probably tell the story in about 5 minutes, which is really cool. So
cool.
I was actually born not too far from where I live right now, which is hilarious because I live in Kent, so which is where I'm recording from and talking to you now.
Yes.
And so born in London, lived in Kent until I was 8 years old. So I'm the oldest of 4.
Okay.
So I've got 2 sisters and a younger brother. So there's a 8-year difference between me and my younger brother, and then my 2 sisters are in between. And so until we were 8, lived in Kent, all fine. Then my mum left my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And due to many things, but if I said psychological abuse, I think that's probably that's how I would justify the reason why she left.
Yeah.
So we lived in a women's refuge for a while. And then left one women's refuge in Surrey. So she left.
So sorry, when your mom left your dad, all the children went with her. Okay.
Yep. So she took all 4 of us. My brother was a baby. I think he was about 3 months.
Okay.
Old.
And during, sorry, just to pause for a second, when this was happening at this young age, you said you were 8 at the time.
Yeah.
Did you know what was going on?
No.
Okay.
No, not at all. Like it's funny, I don't have a lot of memories of my childhood, which is I'm not going to say strange because there's nothing strange in this world. It was just one of those things that I don't remember a lot from that time.
Yeah. Sometimes that could be like your brain being the good, and just protecting you. That's on Last Guest he recognized that.
Yeah.
But okay.
Yeah. So 8, yes. So we lived in a women's refuge. Then we left that one women's refuge because my dad found out where we were. So then we had to move to another one, and I ended up growing up in Crewe. Hence, people will always hear a slight northern twang to my accent.
Okay, that's where it's from. I'm thinking, you should be a bit more of a South Londoner out here.
No, occasionally, like when I'm like getting carried away, like you just get a mismatch. And then you get some like patois coming in as well because my mum's Jamaican, so you get everything. You get everything. You get it all.
And have you got the full patois?
Oh, listen, I'm ready.
Come on, I want to hear some science drop during the podcast. Yeah, let's keep it real out here.
I'm ready.
Okay.
So yeah, we moved to Crewe, and that was in the 1990s, right? And Crewe is not known for having a lot of black people. I think there's like maybe 3 or 4 black families at that time. So everyone thought we were all related.
Okay, there's the first stereotypical thing getting dropped at age of 10. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got all of that going on. Lived in another refuge there for a while. And then pretty much I'm a council estate kid. Make no bones about it. I was the one jumping off first floor balconies, as you do, like, don't know how I didn't break my ankles, but all of those things.
Exploring and challenging and
just doing stuff you ain't meant to be doing. Do you know what I mean? Like hanging
supposedly not meant to be doing.
Right. But, do you know what I mean? All the stuff that everyone's like, oh no, you can't be doing that. And, having fun in skips and, all the stuff that just, as you do when you're on an estate, you just find, I'm not going to swear because I know we've got young people, but, all the things that, you just do. So I actually do have quite a lot of fond memories from that time, because there's an abandonment and a freedom that you have when, I don't know if anyone is listening who grew up on a council estate. It's just a different vibe. It's a different vibe, providing you stay on the right side of the law. I will make that caveat. So if you can stay within the realms of the law, so I have lots of very fond memories of fun, just like, do you know what I mean? It's hard to describe. So that was all of that then. But pretty much from moving to Crewe till I went to university at 19, I was quintessentially the Black person in predominantly white spaces. So primary school, secondary school, work experience, like the only Black person. And an interesting dynamic is my dad's family are from and all pretty much lived in London. So, the whole thing, we used to go down to London occasionally when my dad used to turn up. That's a whole other story. But equally, I wasn't accepted, and my sisters and my brother, we weren't accepted by my cousins either because of our accent.
Okay.
So our northern accent made us sound white in a
yes. Okay. And that's when the younger children are like, yeah, you're not from South, and you're not. Yeah.
Do you have roads where you live, Shereen, or is it still like cobbled streets and all of that stuff?
Yeah. Okay.
So I pretty much spent most of my like teenage years just immersing myself in Black culture, what I call Black culture. So Black culture for me was about the Caribbean.
Okay.
My dad's Guyanese. I didn't really, because of my relationship with my dad, I don't really identify with the Guyanese side. But Jamaica was a big, like my mum always says, probably like I'm more Jamaican than she is. I really immersed myself in that.
And so when did that sort of start? Because obviously I just would like to go back, because there's a theme here that I really think is consistent, and I want to try and keep that, is like the educational side, school. Like we don't have to go too deep, but like you're obviously identify yourself fully as Black, and everyone is identifying you as Black, and you're the only sort of Black child in most of the schools, and in fact all of the settings that you find yourself in. So like, how are you navigating that at the time? You definitely got a strength of character that's shining through. I'm sure that was the same case when you were back then.
I think what's really interesting is a lot of I don't ever remember calling myself Black. I actually don't remember my mum ever referring to us as Black kids. I can remember other people referring to us as Black. I genuinely, up until I went to primary school in Crewe, I wasn't conscious of the color of my skin meaning anything.
Okay, that's amazing.
You know what I mean? So up until then, that was like the first time I was conscious that skin color had value. Right, was when I literally didn't have the kids playing with me until, quote unquote, I went and washed my skin. So that's what they would say. So like, Shereen, when you're not so dirty.
So people actually used to say that.
Yes, the kids.
And so what, from an early age, or is this?
Yeah. I remember.
But you still were just like, what are you on about?
No. Well, at that point, I was like, I don't understand this.
Okay.
And I didn't understand the concept of my skin being dirty.
Oh, okay.
So what then happened, and I always remember, because when I do like keynotes and stuff, I sometimes, depending on my mood, I do share this story, but it's the first time that I remember going to bed and wishing that when I woke up, I had white skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be accepted.
Because
in my mind, I thought my playground life would be, I would have more friends So I had a few friends. I can even remember a couple of their names actually, which is really hilarious. But I had
Start
a
name
few
dropping them and
friends.
be like, look
No,
where
I
I
can't
am.
remember
No,
their
I'm joking.
surnames, and
I'm
then you go,
joking.
so they're like married and all of that sort of good
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
And yeah, it was the first time that I remember thinking my life would be easier
okay.
at 8 years old
Yes.
if my skin color wasn't this. It wasn't about me thinking they're white and I'm black, like literally from that point of view, right? Because the black as an identity didn't mean anything from up until that point.
Mm-hmm.
It was more about just being conscious of I had to erase my color for kids to play with me.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no. Do you think this is something that all young kids, depending on what part of England or what country they are, that experience? Because I remember my niece at one point, you know, her hair's afro, and she was kind of like goes to play with, you know, her friends and being like, oh, why is my hair not straight and stuff. So do you think these are the questions that sometimes can come about from when you're predominantly not in a space with sort of your own culture, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, I can only compare my schooling to like my daughter, right? So she's completely different phase. So I think if you're in if your only space where you see people who look like you is in your house, you don't spend 24/7 in your house as a child.
Yeah.
So if you're turning on the television and you see nothing but white people,
yeah,
then you step out your house and you see nothing but white people. And then you go to school and you see nothing but white people. And then because of you being different, that gives an extra layer of attention purely because of the color of your skin. So forget that, you know, who you are and all of that stuff. You try and assimilate into those spaces. So you try and be like everybody else on one hand. So this is where it's a bit of a mixture. So on one hand, I was a bit like, right, let me try and make sure I dress like everybody else. Let me try and make sure I talk like everybody else. But then as I got to probably about 13, 14, right, and I was heavily influenced by reggae music and dancehall music and R&B, and I'm watching so I started to watch the American programs. Through watching the American programs, that's how I found my identity as a Black teenager, because all of a sudden I'm like busting moves. I'm like doing, because I'm that one choreography. I was the one moving the furniture out the way, you know, Michael Jackson's Thriller. Then I was doing this one. Then I had Boys to Men, Motown Philly going out. So I'm that one, right? So I was a dancer. So I was still kind of known as the club, but always in the club. But I was a dancer. So through the music and then the seeing of music videos, that's how I started to identify myself as Black. Because up until that point, the Jamaican music that I was listening to was purely music on tapes. Like they weren't producing like the music videos.
Don't worry, I grew up on tapes as well, man.
Do you know what I mean? So they were so we didn't have that. So we only had American stuff, and then one or two, you know, Black music artists.
So it's so interesting what you just said there. So basically at the beginning of your childhood, you've got, other than your families, close families, you have nothing to identify with being Black. Everything around you is essentially a white world, if we're being honest. And then all of a sudden you got this American side coming out, MTV based for me and my friends, Channel U.
Yeah.
So, you know, I didn't even think about it, but if you, any sort of council estate house or Black family's house you went into, that is what is on the channel. Everyone's playing it. And you know, I just literally, for the first time, thought like, wow, that's actually because this is actually one of the only continuous places where you're seeing Black culture unfiltered and being shown live and direct. I never even thought of that before.
Yeah.
So okay. So there's, we'll come back to your journey for a second. So, you know, before this podcast, I was trying to think about some questions that I wanted to ask you. And I came across this thing called, I don't know if you've, critical race theory. And it's this theory that came up in America, and it's sort of in the educated space, and they're discussing it. And I listened to a podcast on it, and I'd never really thought about it. But, one of the biggest problems why there is still, racism and race today is because the entire system that has been constructed going way back when, way before us, was ultimately, and this is like educated people who are discussing this, and I haven't got enough context to be able to go into depth, but I think it's something I want to sort of put on the table that we can, have a go at discussing. And ultimately, it's the theory is that this is a construct that was made from, before even slavery days to try and control the narrative, and actually left unchanged or unchallenged. This theory goes on, and I might be, correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry if anyone is listening to this and I get this wrong, but if we do nothing now about race, that it's so ingrained and so systematically adopted that without anyone challenging or trying to deconstruct it, it would just continuously stay there forever, never ending. And that's how ingrained it is into society. That's how ingrained it is into fundamentally every part of society. And when I was listening to it, I just couldn't believe it. This chasm in my own mind opening up, and then you start to see it. There are rules that have been created to ensure, and one of the things I also want to address is that people who have been sort of young white people as well. It's not necessarily their fault or young black people or any culture really. It's no one's fault currently that they think the way they do, and it's down to the individual to try and challenge the system or educate or awaken or whatever you want to say to really try and understand, and obviously this Black Lives Matter has got people understanding privilege and trying to explore what does it mean and all of these things. But sorry, I've just kind of I put a massive thing on the table. Yeah, I just don't want it to be skirted around, and then while going through your own journey, at any point we can sort of touch on that. And are you familiar with this theory, or is it come from a different context?
No, so yes, so I am familiar with critical race theory. To be honest, I don't really reference it too much. Why don't I reference it? Partly because I've got here without having to, into the academics. So if I fast forward to present day, I guess just to give people some context as even to why you can even ask me that question, knowing that I can answer it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, did my research, guys. Just so you know.
Yeah. He did his research. So my background is human resources, right? So I've worked in HR, like my corporate life before I left, about 17 years. And for all of that time, I can probably count on one hand where you would ever hear me publicly talk about race or racism. Right. So because I've bar one or two companies that I've worked for, and even then, pretty much been like the only Black person, or cognizant of not wanting to be the stereotypical Black person talking about racism, playing the victim. So that was always my my perspective, which I now understand is part of internalized racism.
Yeah, it's part of the design.
It's part of the design. So we'll get to the system bit. So 17 years I said nothing. I took the muzzle off my own mouth, so to speak, on the 31st of May 2020, so last year. After, firstly, it was like the murder of George Floyd. But the trigger for me was the video of Amy Cooper, so the white woman walking her dog in Central Park, who threatened to call the police on the Black guy because she was in part of the park that she had no business being in this park. That her and her dog should not have been in this part of the park, right? So rather than mind her business, right, and carry on as way she meant to be, she did not like the fact that a Black man told her that she was not meant to be in this part of the park. And so she picked up the phone to call the police and basically weaponized the color of her skin through saying that I am being harassed and I'm fearful for my life. There is an African American man here, knowing full well what would happen, that the police would shoot first and ask questions later.
Okay.
So in that moment, and I'd seen the video a few times, and I'd getting a little bit chippy on my social media, like a little bit like, because don't forget at that time, the UK, we were still carrying on like racism wasn't a thing, like it was an American thing. And I
Yeah.
felt myself getting more and more like, no, this is not. And I think all the things that I had suppressed over all of my childhood, and then my experiences in the workplace, university was different. It's the only bracket I would put in my experience, completely different. But in this thing, and I just thought to myself, where has 17 years of silence got me, Russell? For 17 years,
Yeah.
I've said nothing. And don't get me wrong, I've got 2 degrees. I've got a good job. I live in a nice house. I've got, a partner I adore. I've got 2 kids, all of that
Absolutely
stuff.
killing it.
Right. And what happened was I had professional people in my network going, oh my goodness, Shereen, like, how is it you've managed to never be a victim of racism? And I was like, who told you that? Right.
Yeah.
So my silence had contributed to this idea that racism wasn't an issue.
Yeah.
So all of our silence contributes
Collectively.
to an idea that racism no longer exists. Russell, people will see you running your own company, doing amazing things, and I bet they will probably look at you and go, "Goodness me, you're one of the ones that made it outside of the system, like because it didn't touch you."
Yeah.
And they don't know. They don't
No.
know because we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
So I recorded a video. It wasn't planned, so recorded a video like 20 minutes, and I just like laid it on the line. I just talked about my experience of being a Black woman here in the UK. I talked about working for organizations, one in and out. So, when you're hired for a job, you can only be hired providing the person that you're replacing is not Black, because they will only ever have one Black person. And even when you're hired, they are not going to hire another person of your level in your department if there's only room for one Black person, only one Black senior person. We don't need any more than that. And if you hire too many people that are too different, in inverted commas, that's a concern. Like, why are you hiring so many people who are Moroccan, who are Arabic, who are from this country? Why? So all of these things, it just all came out, right?
Okay.
Didn't think I was going to do anything with it. I thought I'm just going to do this one video. But what was really interesting is that I thought at the time that I was pretty much throwing my professional career away by talking about this.
Okay. So that's quite a scary thing to do then, especially,
oh my goodness, like,
so
I basically had
this is as well, you've got a 1-year-old and a 10-year-old at this point.
So my daughter she just turned 12, and then my daughter at that time was 1. Yeah, she was 1.
So quite a brave thing to have to address based on, the fact that it could affect your career.
Yeah. And I'd already left corporate, so I wasn't going back. And I had started my HR consultancy, and I was thinking I was just getting that off the ground. And I was like, I've got to throw all this away, like, because I'd then become the person who I spent 17 years trying not to be. I'm now becoming that person by recording this one video. So this thought was just on one video. The irony, right, is here I am. What I spent 17 years trying not to be, and I am this person. I am the Black woman. Yes, I talk about racism. Yes, white supremacy, white privilege, white fragility. I talk about it all day long. So the irony is not lost. But at that time, and then I didn't think anything else was going to happen. I was like, well. And you can see, like, my first video was fine. When you watch like the following videos, because I basically carried on talking, Russell, because I was like, right, like a tap, you can't switch off.
Yeah.
So every day I carried on talking for 100 days.
Did you?
I did 100 videos by 2 weeks. And my story got featured in Forbes.
And so, yeah, I was going to say, what's the reaction? What was the initial reaction, the first video? Like, were you going to carry on talking, or was it the reaction to the video that kind of made you think?
It had nothing to do with the reaction. It was
how it made you feel? Like, what made you?
I just thought, if I'm here talking, I might as well keep talking. And in my second video, and I said, look, because I was like, look like something the cat dragged in. I was like grey. I sat in my garden. I was like, and I continue to do a few quite emotional interviews. I've been like, people see me crying. People see, like, they've seen it all on my soft focus, because it's before, like, I upgraded my camera game. And I just thought, well, I might as well just keep going. And at that time, not not very many people were paying too much. Like, so you had people initially like, oh my God, Shereen, you're so brave, and like, da, da, da. And you speak your truth. And then when I carried on, it kind of petered off because I was really challenging, because I was annoyed. I was like for organizations that were ignoring what was happening in the US. Did a few radio things and whatever, and I just kept going. And then before you know it, I remember somebody commented, it was like, Shereen, you're at video number 23. And they were like, and I was like, I know, can you imagine if I got to like 50 videos? I'm now on like 140, some like crazy number. But so at the time, you just put one foot in front of the other, and I just wanted to keep talking about something that I felt like we should all keep talking. And the other dynamic, just to say on my two children, is my 12, almost 13-year-old, as she likes to remind me, is black, because her dad is Jamaican. We're not together anymore. But my youngest daughter is white passing, because my partner is Estonian. Yeah. So I'm thinking to myself, like, we're going to start to have conversations in the living room, around the kitchen table, about what's going on in life and work. And I have two children that I love dearly, who will have very different experiences of the world because of the color of their skin. And if I don't think about how I can enable my black daughter to feel like her lived experiences is valid, but also how I enable my youngest daughter, who is biracial, to understand the dynamics of what that means in this society, then I failed as a parent. And my partner, who's Estonian and, with affection, as white as they come, in terms of his heritage, right? Yeah. If he doesn't pay attention and cognizant to this, then we're no different than the many people who claim they don't see color. We're no different to the very people who feel uncomfortable talking about race, so they don't talk about it because it makes them feel uncomfortable. And therefore, I am perpetuating the same cycle. So the thing with racism is you can be a victim, but you can also be an enactor of it. So back to your question, if I may, when you said about, critical race theory and institutional and systemic racism, what the challenge that we have, particularly in the UK, is that we've always focused on racism being about behavior, the N-word, racial abuse, right? Universally, bar like 0.02% of the population, we all agree that is outrageous, right? Nobody stands up for physical harm due to skin color. Nobody, right? Where it becomes tricky is when we understand that racism isn't just about behavior, that is the output. Racism is a system, and it is a system that, to your point, was deliberately created to reinforce a social construct of the world which said whiteness is a social construct, therefore white people, white Europeans, Anglo-Saxons, whatever your historical term is, are the epitome of civilization. So they're at the top, right? And everybody else is underneath by skin color. So this is where we get into proximity to whiteness. This is where we get into colorism within certain communities, right? And certain, as we know, with Black people, by definition of the color of our skin being at the very bottom. What also a lot of people don't understand is Black as an identity was never something that Black people chose. Black was given to us as a label to distinguish between white people, because it wasn't enough to just have humans. So when you, pre-slavery times, when you have a look at ancient history and ancient civilizations, we were called the Moors. Black people. There's different terminology for us, but we were called the Moors, right? Now, if you just take the word on its own, it has no positive or negative connotation, does it?
No.
Moors. It's just it means, right? When you then add in language, okay, and think about what we associate with whiteness, right?
Good. Clean, good,
right? What do we associate with Black?
Dark, dirty,
bad,
bad, yeah.
dirty. Like, you know, my experience of being a
Yeah.
child at school, right? And so what I say to people is you've got to understand that as Black people, we are one of the only, I think, populations from that point of view who were even denied the right to be tied to the countries where we are from.
Mm-hmm.
So you can be, my partner's Estonian.
Mm-hmm.
He's not white.
Yeah.
Estonian. He's Estonian. If you're from France, you're French. If you're from Spain, you're
So
Spanish.
that's okay.
Right? So the importance of that is understanding that that was deliberate to not have us tied to anything. So we then become an identity according to our skin color, not through any sovereignty to the country that we come from. But what we also have, the dynamic in the UK, is we are not taught about our history in terms of how we came to being and how whiteness as a construct and then as a system came in through colonization and imperialism. So colonization, just for the benefit of you wonderful young people, is where you go into another country and you claim that country is yours, irrespective of what's going on in the, you know, whoever's there. Christopher Columbus is a classic example. He did not discover America, it was already there. You had Native Americans there. But he came and said, well, this is ours because they're not civilized. Back to this whole idea about civilization and whiteness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So colonization is you go and you enforce your customs and your ways onto the people and the society and the systems, right? So that is an impact that comes from racism, because it comes from this idea that white superiority is the pinnacle, so everything else is a comparison too. Imperialism is when, for you to get that, you use force, and it's military force.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we hear these two terms and people are like, oh, what does that mean? Like, we'll just, so that's what it means. So colonization, you don't need force. We can just land tomorrow and go, we claim this rock. And somebody will go, well, no, this rock's mine. And we go, no.
Yeah.
It's my rock now.
Yeah.
It's mine now. Right? And then if they say, no, we go, right, we're bringing our army. And then we take the rock.
And that's imperialism.
That's imperialism. So that's
okay.
a really simple explanation of the
Thank you for that. I have to be honest, I wasn't even 100% clear on the two. So
yes, that's the two things. So when you come to understanding, back to your point about seeing racism as a system and institutional, what people forget that it wasn't slavery that created racism. What happened was, and I did a podcast with a fabulous guy called Joe Edward Goza, who wrote a book about the history of racist ideology.
Mm-hmm.
And it, of course, it comes from the British. Of course it had to, didn't it? It came from the British. It all did. The slave trade, everything comes from the British. Comes from the British. And it started off with this idea of so when we hear the age of enlightenment and the age of reasoning, right?
Yeah.
It's this idea that logic, through the eyes of those people who were seen as the epitome of civilized human beings. And who was that? White, middle class to upper class men.
Yeah.
So basically, the way the world was constructed, or the way society was constructed, think our legal system, think our education system, was all geared around a few white men who defined what normal is.
Okay.
And then all that happened is we inherited those systems. So our legal system goes back how long, right? We've got Houses of Parliament, Houses of Commons. It's steeped in history and rhythms and practices and routines, right, that predate. So all that happened is that carried on ticking over. And then we get into, right, we need to grow we need to become kings of our castle. We can't do this with what we've got going on. So what we need to do is we need to go to other countries and see what's going on. So we're going to go to India and see what's going on there. Maybe we take some tea. Maybe we take some other things. We're going to go to Africa. Oh my goodness, because guess what? If we have people that we can take either some of what I call the gold, meaning some of the natural resources, and bring it into our country, we can sell that and we can make money, become kings of our castle.
Yeah.
But how about we take these individuals and get them to work for free? And that way we become kings of our castle. And it doesn't matter because they're savages, right? So we dehumanized Black people to justify using free labor. And that was built on a premise that white civilization, so the white view of the world, was superior, and anybody else who was not white, who did not fit that, that's even with women, but so there's a scale, so that's another conversation. But therefore, that's where we got to the place of going, well, we can do that, we can bring these people in, and the best way we can justify that is to claim that they're not human, really. So we lock them up, we do. So all the things that we know about enslaved people, and I am a direct descendant of slaves, by the way, so, or enslaved people. So this is a particular something that I've had to work through.
Yeah, so my first guest as well. He's the same
history.
history.
So there's it's
so
fine.
Shereen, can you just pause for 1 second? I just want to ask one question. I'm always questioning absolutely everything in my own mind, and there's something you said. So basically saying that racism began with English white people constructing this, this system, and then essentially exporting it to sort of create dominance across the world. And so my question is, previous to Britain or Great Britain sort of becoming the dominant force, going back in history, obviously there's been countries or sectors of the world that have been the upper force, Ottoman Empire, empires before, Chinese Empire. And my question is, during these sort of periods of power, if we call it that, like, were they not using the same sort of constructs to control and build more power? Is it the same thing? Like, people have been doing this from the beginning of time, because men and women, they dominate. They get power, they get a taste of it, then they expand, dominate, etc. And so slaves wasn't, from what I've read, and I don't know if that's because history was rewritten, etc. And we can go into that a little bit. But I guess my question and challenging, I just want to be clear from your perspective, not questioning what's happening here by any stretch of the imagination, but is this a construct that's happened from the beginning of when the UK took power, or is this something that there's been elements of and it's just been improved on and so made even more powerful by the minds that be that started this?
Yeah, so I think, I'll try and do it in 9 minutes, because I'm conscious of our time as well. But so yes, the dynamics of power. So remember, when I said about these white guys, right, that's going, right, king of your castle. That's why I use that phrase. It's about power. It's about resources. It's about, we need to have, and not by any means necessary, but this is what it means. We need to start thinking about how we can succeed. And I won't go into there's another history connected to that.
There's another podcast episode.
There's another something about that, but there's always been this idea that somebody has to be at the top. That's power.
Yeah.
Right? And there's always been, you go back to Romans.
Got that. So got that.
So there's always the power dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
However, the ability to do that at scale and systemize it is where this is different, because that's all I just wanted to be. I just wanted to we've systemized racism, and we've systemized it. It's one of the most successful systems humankind has ever created.
Cool. That's
because it keeps producing the same outcome. Time and time and time again.
Not cool, by the way. Just saying.
He understood. No, I get that. Not that word. Yeah.
So perfect. I just wanted to get context from your understanding of where that is for our listeners, just to kind of Okay, cool. With you.
Yeah. So it keeps producing the same outcomes every single time. And the thing is about, and I did a talk to a German company out in Berlin, right? And I said to them, one of the things that people have to understand about racism is you don't need to be overtly racist for the system to keep ticking, right? What the system needs is for you to do nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because it is built on us not dismantling it. So it's like a cog, a well-oiled machine that will keep on turning, and it's been on turning for centuries. Why, by definition, we are still here having the same conversation that they would have had in the 1960s, the same conversations that they would have had on the plantation fields, the same conversations.
And fundamentally, in answer to the question, I guess that I just put to you, is that's the biggest difference from all the other power structures that have gone on in the past, is that this is a system that has been so well constructed, as you just said, that you can't dismantle it.
Yeah. So what happens is we became conditioned. So what we didn't have is that, how many times in history have you heard like the slave uprisings, or the this uprising, or the that uprising, right? So, you know, back in those days, the ways to disrupt power was through sheer force. You know, will of an army, will of a, you know, people coming to get, you know, all of that stuff. That's history. That's what people would call like the barbarianism. But there's something in the simplicity of that, because that's the way they dealt with it. We are almost victims of the age we live in, where everything is here. So we no longer need to be kept in chains, because we're conditioned to not challenge the system. And you are vilified, or you are attacked, or you are humiliated. And what that teaches everybody else is, you go and question the system, but look what will happen to you if you do. There is no better way of keeping power and control over people, by making them think that they don't have power or control.
Okay. And so this is where, like, from my own experience and from yours, which you touched on, is where you might experience it as you drive, you know, to becoming successful, but where you use that extra 20-30% extra energy, sometimes 40-50%, to, you know, to show you will not, you know, you are not going to affect me, you're not going to break me. And that's really where people say, oh, you haven't experienced racism. But it's like, you have. We just decided not to challenge it and to rise above it by using the energy, you know, because not from our perspective, or from my perspective, I'm not going to waste my energy trying to educate someone who I feel is not going to be wanting by the design of the construct, but actually use my energy to show that I'm an individual, my own self, and I'm going to get through this. But ultimately, you're just ignoring racism.
Yeah, and I think I'll say just on my final words with that is that I fight so hard to make sure that we keep the focus on this, because fundamentally I believe that there is so much wasted energy that Black people, that other minoritized individuals are facing by dealing with racism, that stops us being able to solve some of the other world's biggest problems. It stops us from being truly creative. It stops us from innovating. It stops us from being able to support one another. It stops us from being able to live and just enjoy and have fun. Because if you spend all your time fighting, right, you fight to be heard, you fight to be seen, you fight to be acknowledged, you fight to have your lived experience of the world seen and heard, you don't have energy to be creative, to excel in different spaces, right? Whether you want to start up your own business, whether you want to, you know, go and progress and within a company, there is only so much energy that you can expend. So part of it is literally down to logistics. I'm like, why would we want to have people having to fight? And the reality is because the system needs for us to carry on doing that, because if we're doing that, Russell, we don't have the energy to go and fight. And, you know, in my last 60 seconds, what I will say is, well, bring it, because I've got energy all day. Hello.
All day, every day. So thanks, Shereen. Amazing insights. I think we're definitely going to have to, an hour is definitely nowhere near enough.
Always. That's always the case with me.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously there's some young listeners, there's going to be some business owners, entrepreneurs, different people from different cultures and backgrounds, like trying to navigate this new space of challenging the preconceived ideas and maybe even trying to challenge the actual systems. I mean, what are the three things that you would give advice to sort of young Shereen? You know, hopefully on the next podcast we can go into more depth into, you know, your education and stuff like that. like, what advice would you give to young people, older people, you know, business leaders? Three pieces of advice to sort of, you know, help, you know, make things better for everyone involved in the world, you know, and start dismantling this systemized construct.
I would say the first thing that we have to all work better at is not being so worried about what other people think.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, to my point, in my example of my story, I was so fearful about being rejected, because human beings, we all just want to belong. Like, fundamentally, we're not meant to be on our own. We don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So our behavior is driven according to acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
So many of us will stay silent because we want to be accepted, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's got nothing to do with skin color. There's many scenarios in life where that is a thing. So we have to disrupt that silence, and the way to disrupt that silence is to stop worrying about what other people think and do what's in your heart and what you feel is right.
Okay.
That's my first bit of advice. My second bit of advice is you define who you are.
100%. That's one thing about myself I've always,
right. So whether, you know, there will be anyone of any age, if you want to identify as Black, you identify with Black. If you want to identify as somebody from the diaspora, the African diaspora, you identify as that. If you want to identify as mixed race or biracial or this,
Kenyan,
fine, right, whatever.
Yeah.
You take it. Just because society says that you are Black, right? If that is not sitting right with you, don't take it.
Yeah.
You know, if society labels you as Asian and you don't, that's not your vibe. That's not how you see yourself. You see yourself associated to your country or something specific in your culture. You take that. Because remember, I said this is about control, right? We have control.
Yeah.
So I would just say, just take that. And I think the third thing is, if there's anything that I've said that's made you curious, go and follow that curiosity. You know, it's not about me. Go and start nosying, you know, whatever, because everyone always has the things that piques their interest, right? You know, I was this years old when I learned that Black history didn't start with slavery, right? Because up until I was 39 years old, I thought it started with slavery. I had to go learn, you know, and then like opened the world, and I was like, oh my God, look at what we invented. Like the Moors, we invented this. So curiosity, you know, there is nobody that has all the answers. I don't have all the answers. My job is to unlock you to be curious, so you can be inspired to go and see where it lands you. That's all my job. So
okay. You've done a great job, Shereen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been you know, an eye-opening podcast and also a journey. I mean, we didn't really get to go deep into.
That's like a whole biography, but
no, but that's what we want to do. We want to get to know the real Shereen, and you know what fundamentally kind of made you, you know, so strong and to challenge, which is, you know, quite a big thing in society. But thank you. I really appreciate your time. I know you got to go.
Yes, I do. I've got some people waiting. So I'll go
tell them.
And then you'll hear me on BBC Radio 4 later.
Oh, really? Well, okay. What time? I'm locked in.
Lord knows. It'll all be in here.
Okay.
It's all going to be in here. It's all going to be in here. I'll know, right. But I'll just tell to turn up.
Look, again, thank you so much. And thanks for also giving us those 3 pieces of wisdom. And I'll definitely be following it myself.
Cool.
All right.
You take care, Russell.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. Bye.